third season of the Now Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser podcast. We changed things up a bit with a name change, and the podcast is full of diverse guests who have fascinating stories of how they are leading their own lives, taking risks, serving others, and loving the lives they lead. They will share how they lead their own lit-up lives, how they achieved inner peace and joy, and the work they did to get there, and continue to do to stay there. Join Debbie this season as she digs in, shares how she started and continues to love herself, love those around her, and love the work she feels called to do. This season, you will hear some real and deep areas of Debbie's life as she shares the work she has done and continues to do to lead her own life in the hopes that through her experiences, you might be able to move into a more lit up life yourself. Listen in as she shares experiences, stories, and tools to help you. Now let's get started.
Hey there, folks. Welcome back to this next episode of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. And I am absolutely thrilled to have my guest with us today. Her name is Lindsay Gordon. She is out of San Francisco. And I met Lindsay. Well, you know what? I go back and forth from Lindsay to Lindsay.
Lindsay.
Okay, so I'm going to call you Lindsay from now on. See, you learn new things about people all the time. I just caught myself. So Lindsay and I met back in, oh my gosh, was that what, 2020, before the world changed as we know it, right? And this was January. We met in New Mexico, thinking it was going to be warm, and we were all freezing. And we met each other and kind of got to know each other a little bit in that situation. But later, Lindsay and I were paired up in a group of 4 people to do some masterminding with this international mastermind group that I'm a part of, and really connected strongly for 6 months with that. And I feel like we've got kind of one of those things where I just feel like even 10 years from now, we're still going to like be in contact, right? And so I just love that.
We better.
Yeah, exactly. But I want to share with people before I turn it over to you to introduce yourself. Like when I met Lindsay, she had longer hair. And okay, I'm just going to say it. She looked very prim and proper, very East Coast to me. Although it's interesting because you live in San Francisco. Yeah. And that was just like my first impression, right? And she comes in, I think was it the first day or the second day? Because you know what I'm about to say.
Probably the second day.
I think it was.
Day to gear up.
I think it was. This was a 3-day retreat. And on the second day, because part of it was, what do you want? And Lindsay had a very specific desire for her life. And we're going to talk about that today. But this very specific desire. And she walked in on the second day somewhere, I think it was in the morning, and said, I just quit my job. And it wasn't just any job. You were making really good money at this job that you had. And so I looked at you and I thought, wow, just the guts and the courage that you took to do that. But you knew you had a bigger calling. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because Lindsay is someone that from that first, within 24 hours of me knowing her, stepping into, like, you are someone that embodies this idea to me of leading your life and helping other people lead their lives too. And so I'm going to turn it over to you and have you like officially introduce yourself and kind of what you do in this world. And then we'll just take it from there.
Sounds good. So I am a career coach for analytically minded people. And the reason I say that is because I have an engineering degree, which is quite unusual in the world of career coaching. And I'm all about helping people stop doing what they think is right in their career and actually start figuring out what is right for them. So it's about making those courageous career decisions that actually work for you in your life and feeling really good about those decisions that you're making.
Yeah, Lindsay, thank you. Because you spur a question for me. So, because I think this applies to a lot of things in life where I know I spent a lot of years doing what I thought I should be doing based on culture, whether it be the Midwest, my family culture, where I was from in Kansas City. You went to college, you got a job, you lived for the weekends, you got like 80% of the people, maybe 90% at that point in time, whether you wanted to get married or not, got married, they had children. Like that was just what you did. And so that resonates with me, even though I'm not an engineering background or an analytical mind necessarily all the time. And so what have you seen with your clients when it comes to that? Because there is a jump where they go from, hey, here's what I think I should do, which people are really tribally connected to a lot of times too, to here's what I desire to do.
It's tough. It is a really courageous thing. And I think what I've discovered across talking to people all day, every day about the pressures they feel for these last 5 years is we feel a very common set of pressures. So there's kind of like the societal soup that we are swimming in. That's like the, I should have it figured out by now. I should be further ahead in my career. I should always be wanting more dollars, more responsibility, more leadership. So there are a lot of those kind of pressures and expectations. And then we all also have a very unique set, as you mentioned, family, upbringing, cultures. And so there's constantly this pressure that exists. And so part of what I do with people is, how can we acknowledge that so that you can at least see it? Like a client today was talking about how the pressures that he feels, it's not that people are actively telling him these things, but the voices are in there from somebody at some time. And now it just fuels your own self-talk as to, well, I should do this. I really shouldn't do that. So I think the more that we can acknowledge and then choose, if there are cultural expectations that really work for you and you want to choose that, great. But if there are ones that you don't want to, how do we find your agency to make choices that go outside of that? But it is not easy. Yeah.
So let's talk about that. And first of all, I hadn't even thought about that. I remember coaching leaders in corporate America that not everybody wants to be the CEO.
Yep.
It's not this pressure of you constantly have to be moving up, although that is the culture a lot of times in more corporate settings. So when you think about this whole kind of, I'm going to call it the mind jump, the Jedi mind jump, so like a mind jump, like this moving from this thought of what I should do. I know earlier we were talking about this whole thought of giving yourself permission.
Yeah.
Tell me about how you draw that out of people and what happens.
Yeah. So the first step is always acknowledging those pressures. We get them written down on paper. We get them out of running around in your head. And then we need to switch to, what is it that you want? How do we start to discover what's important to you? So we go through a values exercise of looking at the past decisions that you've made in your life and what were the motivations behind those. And so what can we learn about your values? We look at your strengths. What are you great at? What do you want to bring? We look at the environments that allow you to thrive. What is it about a team that allows you to thrive? What is it about a physical environment? And so the more that people start to know about what they want, which I think is the hard part, to really discover that and listen to it, then you can start to make choices in line with that. And it just feels so good to say, I am choosing, one of the things I tell people often is, it is okay for you to have a boring job if it works for you. And so if you know why this boring job is actually fulfilling some of your top values, using your strengths, but it just doesn't fulfill your entire life, and you're able to do the things that you want to outside of work, that works for some people. But it also doesn't work for some people. So having that clear, I am choosing this for this reason, is so freeing for people.
Yeah, Lindsay, thanks for bringing that up, because it reminds me when I worked in an international company, as a leader, I was filled up and wasn't bored with the work of working with people. I don't know how you could be bored with like leading people, because it's different every day. But that's just my value orientation there. But when I did that, it filled me up, but it wasn't my, like, what really deeply filled my cup. And so I also was a youth pastor outside of that and spent a good 20 hours a week doing that. And it was all volunteer. And so when you say that, I think there's so many times that people don't give themselves permission to say, hey, to your point, I can have this job that I know doesn't necessarily, I get out of bed every morning and I go, I enjoy it, but it's not what lights me up, where this over here lights me up, but this allows me to do this.
Yep. Exactly.
And that's kind of what I hear you saying. Do you run into that? Like when you think about this whole giving myself permission to do what I want, you kind of, as you walk into this, say, it's okay to have this. And it's also okay to go after this deep need or desire that you have. Like what percentage, not that, I don't know if this matters, but it's intriguing to me. What percentage do you kind of say, I want to do this because it allows me to do this? And what others go after the whole like kit and caboodle of this is going to fill me up, or I'm using different words than you do, but that like creates this value orientation that it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah. I would guess, and I don't have numbers on this, but I would guess that it's a little bit more weighted to I do the work and it is enjoyable enough, but it allows me to do these other things. I would guess that it's slightly weighted in that direction. And one of the great resources that a listener could check out, there is a definition of a good enough job from the book Refuse to Choose, which I love. So that's kind of how I refer to it with my clients is you can choose the good enough job where it gives you that freedom and financial stability and safety to be able to do the other stuff on your own time. And when I read people that definition, some people are like, oh, yes, that sounds great. I am so relieved that I can aim for that. And then other people you can see as soon as I start reading the definition, they're just like, nope, 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 do not want that. That sounds like that's too many hours to be working on a thing that doesn't light me up. So that's kind of my favorite way to talk about it with clients and see which side of the fence they're on.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So let's switch to you a little bit. So when you think about stepping out in faith and saying, I just quit my job and I'm going to step into doing this, what about, I mean, because you were leading your life, you were going, and it had its ups and downs.
Yeah.
You know, and when I say ups and downs, you know, different struggles, even mindset things that you and I work on and me that I worked on. And so when you look at this, what lights you up today in regards to what you're doing?
Yeah. So one of the experiences that I had at work was I was working at Google for many years. And I remember across the 6 years, I just never felt like I fully fit in there. And I couldn't figure out what it was. But whenever I would share that I wasn't quite happy at Google, people looked at me, kind of said, but it's the number one place to work in the world. And that was kind of the end of the discussion. So the whole time I was there, I had this feeling of, I'm not quite sure why I don't quite fit in. I have a sense that something's out of alignment, but there was no room for me to say, oh, it might not actually be a fit. And instead, it occurred to me as a personal failure, as, well, why can't I hack it? You know, everybody else is happy at Google. Yeah. And so I want nobody else to have that experience of this work is not working for me. And I feel like it's a personal failure. So I do everything in my power to allow people to say, this might not be a right fit for me, and to discover and be able to articulate, it is out of alignment. It's not bad. It's not a problem. You know, I have a lot of gratitude for what I was able to do while at Google, but it just wasn't a fit. And it feels so freeing to be able to say that. And so helping other people not only do what they want, but also find their agency in a workplace that doesn't make that easy all the time. So that is really what I am up to. And I would love to have a workplace of everybody that actually gets to do what's right for them.
Yeah, isn't that's so true? And I think about like even some of the leadership lessons that I learned is helping and understanding what people's value orientations are, what their strengths were, and making sure we have the right people in the right spot. And if
Yes.
somebody's not doing a job well, or they're not like super motivated about it, there's probably a reason.
Yep.
And it's what you're talking about. And so how do you shift that into something? I remember too, unfortunately, I worked in the banking industry when we went through the mortgage crisis. And so there were quite a few layoffs that happened. And I remember walking through that and the struggle of that. But interestingly enough, like everyone that I worked with that left and went somewhere else actually said it was the best thing that ever happened to them, right? It was like, it helped them think outside the box about what else is there? What could there be? Now, I want to talk a little bit about a shift that I've noticed.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming I'm noticing this across the nation. I think there are pockets maybe, and there are all sorts of reasons why, and we don't have to get into the reasons why, but I want to know how this is impacting your business in the shift of it's become an employee market.
Yep.
So tell me how that shifted what you do,
Yeah.
if at all.
I think there is a lot of power on the employee side. And what I love equipping my clients with is ways to have powerful conversations that sound like, here's what I'm up to in the world. This is what I'm looking for. These are the strengths I want to bring. This is how I want to contribute. This is the environment I know is going to allow me to thrive. And I would love to hear how that shows up in your organization, or how that plays out in the role. And so I think the conversations about jobs need to be two-way, because I think so often it's the like, well, just show up in the interview and say everything that you think you need to say in order to land the job, but you're not actually having a conversation about values, what you need out of a job for it to be a good fit. So I think having much more rich conversations about trying to figure out fit from both directions feels much more doable when employees have employees have kind of more power.
Yeah. And kind of what I hear you saying too, Lindsay, is that it's really a dual interview.
Yep.
As you're a person out looking for something different, you're interviewing that company to see if it's a cultural fit, a value fit, all of those things that are important that you work with those clients with, as well as then the company making sure that that's a right fit for you.
Yep.
So when you think about the market today, and if someone were in something that they were in that, it's okay, but I really want something that jazzes me a little bit more, or lights me up a little bit more, or just in the market to find another career, another job, what are 3 pieces of advice you would give them?
Number 1, get incredibly clear about what you are looking for. That's what we've talked about so far: values, strengths, environment, how you want to contribute, whether it's the good enough job, whether it's not the good enough job. So get clear about that. I think number 2, get into action before you feel ready.
Hence day 2, I quit my job.
Yeah. A lot of clients are like, well, I don't want to reach out to my network yet because I don't know the exact job title I'm looking for, and I don't want to waste a connection. But if you go out there and say, this is what's important to me, these are the strengths I'm looking to use, this is the environment I think I want to be in, what does that make you think of? You're going to get a lot more answers and a lot more information through conversation. So get into action, have those conversations. And then maybe 3 is approach it with a lot of curiosity and a lot of grace. I think we can often get into like, well, I'm not going to be able to make a move without having to cut my salary, or it's too late for me to go and try to do this thing. I think if we can give ourselves more grace to say like, okay, I am in exploration mode. I am being curious about what could come next. I am going to give myself grace to test things out, to see what it might look like. I think there's a lot more freedom and playfulness and space in that, which we do not often give ourselves in the job search.
I love that. I love that. And because, I like to play and have fun. So like when you talk about playfulness, part of leading and so thank you for that advice, first of all. And then part of you leading your lit up life is you're doing some fun things that we talked about before we got onto the recording. And
Yes.
so tell us what you're doing because it's really important. And so let me tie this in a little bit, Lindsay, in the fact that to be a leader, to lead your life in the way that you want to do it. This is Debbie's personal opinion, but there are some scientific pieces behind this that you have to play. You have to have creativity. And if you think about innovation is really another word for creativity.
Yep.
And so you're doing some fun stuff in some creative ways.
Yes.
So tell us what you're doing.
So I have always loved baking. And what happens when you always love something? People are like, oh my gosh, you should do this for a career. So I had enough people say like, oh my God, you should be a baker. You should have a bakery, that I was like, okay, how can I test this out? How can I test this out in the smallest way possible? Do I want to do this as a hobby, or do I want to do this as a full-time job? And I happen to live 15 minutes from the San Francisco Baking Institute.
Oh, wow.
And so a couple of years ago, I was like, okay, they run 5-day professional baking classes, which is mostly attended by professionals, but they also allow enthusiasts. So I went and baked for 5 days straight, like had to get a baking jacket, like waking up at ungodly hours because I don't usually get up very early. And I loved it. And at the end of that experience, I was like, okay, what did I love about it? And I figured out the couple of things I loved about it: the challenge, the variety, and the fact that I got to learn so much. And then I was like, okay, of those 3 things that I really valued, how many of those would occur if I did it as a full-time job? And immediately it was very clear that probably 0 of those would show up. And so in 5 days, I answered this, I don't know, decade-long question of, do I want to be a baker? And the answer was no. And so once a year, I treat myself to a baking course at this baking institute. I spend, between 2 and 5 days, whichever the course is, pretending to be a baker, like doing it full time, loving it. And then I'm like, great, I don't need to necessarily do that as a full-time job right now. Maybe I change my mind in the future. So this week I am doing a layer cake course to learn about making flowers and succulents out of buttercream.
That's so cool. And I just love that. And part of, I think, why you like baking is it's a pretty precise.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's very measured and precise, right? To me, you're either a cook or a baker, right? In a different form, right?
Yep.
But I think you tapped onto something really important that I know I run into too, because I'm constantly helping people find what they're passionate about, what they love, and trying to figure out, can you monetize that into something?
Yeah.
But I think what you bring up is a really important component of looking at what it is that you love. And if you decide to go into business, or you did this as a position, like what did you realize out of those things that you enjoyed? Like, what was the wake up call to say, if I went and did this and owned my own business, I wouldn't be the one baking and doing the thing that I loved? Like, what was it for you? Because that is a true statement.
Yeah.
When you're an entrepreneur, there's a whole lot of other things that go into it other than just your lane of genius.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I think for me, it was the fact that there are some very expected things about a bakery. You wake up extremely early. There aren't really like nighttime bakeries, but maybe I design one. So
all those people coming home from the bars, Lindsay, they need a place to get donuts or baked goods.
So yeah, for me and the flexibility and lifestyle that I enjoy having, I would probably never see my husband if I worked baking hours. The learning aspect. So at the Baking Institute, you get to go to lecture every morning to learn about the scientific properties of the different ingredients and why you use margarine versus why you use butter and, all these different things. I love learning, but if I went into a bakery, that's not going to be built in for me. It's going to be mostly making the same thing every day because clients expect, we have the this this and we have the that and we have the this, and you want that every day. And so it was just so clear to me that the learning, the challenge, the variety just wasn't going to be there in the way that it is there in these classes that I absolutely love.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I can't wait. I can't wait to come to San Francisco and taste some of your baked goods.
Oh
I'll have to
my
bring you some of my sourdough starter.
Yes.
I make really good English muffins. Of course, I don't eat that, but anyway, enough on that. So kind of as a final piece, one of the things that I look at when you stepped up and said, well, and secondly, you not only quit your job, but then I don't remember how many months it was after that, you shaved your head.
Yeah.
Like you got rid of all your hair, and it's growing back now. You have it back in a bun. But like I look at these things that you stepped out in faith doing. And to me, faith means many different things. And so when I say, like, how did you step out in faith? What does that mean to you? And how did whatever your definition of faith is play into that?
Yeah. I think it occurs to me as trust. And it also really connects to my values. So my top values are adventure, ambition, and wholeheartedness. And I think there's a sense that I am trusting that this is a lifelong adventure. It is an exploration. There gets to be a lot of playfulness. There gets to be a lot of heart. And so do I ever have it figured out? No. I don't even want to aim for that. I want to aim to be trusting, to be showing up for the adventure, to be trying completely new things, and knowing that at the end of life, it's going to feel like I lived a great one. I lived full out. I really did live wholeheartedly. And that's how I want to go out.
What's your next adventure other than your baking class with buttercream?
I'm baking. It is my next adventure. I did just get an electronic drum kit. So I feel like learning the drums is my next adventure.
That's awesome. And you got the type that you can put the earbuds in so nobody else hears it. I love it.
Yep.
I love it. I can't wait. The baking drummer. I love it. That's fantastic. So I'm going to turn it over. One last thing. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you just feel burning on your heart that you want to talk about before we close up?
Yeah. I would just love to hit home the fact that I talk a lot about doing what's right for you and giving yourself permission to choose what really works. But then we always have to be really real about the flip side of that the workplace, that the world is not necessarily set up in that way. And so a lot of people are going to run into barriers of sexism, racism, all kinds of things that are going to get you stopped in the workplace. But I want you to be able to find the agency as much as possible to be able to figure out how to navigate those things. So yes, let's do what we want to do. And let's try to make the workplace a place where people actually get to make the choices that feel good to them.
That's awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. And so kind of with that, if someone wanted to look up more about you and potentially talk to you more about even their search for a career that fits them, how would they get in touch with you?
Yes, you can go to my website. My business is alifeofoptions.com. Lots of good resources there, lots of great client stories. And then also I would love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn, because that's a place where I share a lot of client stories, things to think about. So would love to connect with you in either of those places.
Awesome. Lindsay, thank you so much for being with us and sharing what you do and how that makes a difference in the world. And for those of you listening, thank you for listening. And if you want to get in touch with me, I am going through a URL change, so you can still find me at 3V as in Victor consulting.com, or my new URL, which is leadyourlituplife.com, and find out a little bit more about working with me. And I know either one of us we both do similar work, but in a very different piece of it. And either one of us would love to talk to you, but definitely look up Lindsay. She is someone that I will say, Lindsay, you probably don't know this, but when I have people talk about wanting to be more visible in LinkedIn, I say, go check out Lindsay Gordon's profile and see, because you do such great content on that platform. And so definitely look her up on LinkedIn. So with that, this is another episode of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser, and everybody have a fantastic day.